According to the Centers for Disease Control, the numbers show chlamydia, along with syphilis, rose for the third year in a row. Joining us now to talk more about this health concern is family practitioner Dr. Shawn Abrishamy. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Abrishamy.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about this. Sexually transmitted diseases have been on the decline for so long, and now we're seeing a rise in chlamydia. What do we attribute this to? More screening, more testing? What's going on here?
There's definitely more screening going on, even. In fact, especially with pap smears every year.
Right.
We also do check for gonorrhea, chlamydia, as well, except syphilis.
Okay, so doctors people are getting screened and they're catching it a little more frequently.
Absolutely, we're definitely catching it earlier, and that's a great thing.
Tell us about what are the symptoms of chlamydia?
Well, it's interesting because in women we don't have any symptoms.
Right. Okay.
As a whole, on occasion you can get a little bit of a discharge. However, in men it's much more prominent. You actually do get a nice. It sounds like juicy discharge, but you can get yellow discharge, white discharge. It can come out in any forms. In women, we don't see anything. Oh. When in women, we generally get a complaint of, for example, I have an infection. They sometimes can get a little bit of burning, a little bit of stinging as a whole, or they'll come in for infertility problems, pain that they just can't describe, especially in the pelvis.
Right. Now, if there aren't any symptoms, okay, let's say the men are experiencing some symptoms, but the women aren't. I got to imagine it's going untreated in a lot of cases. What happens if chlamydia goes untreated? What are the repercussions?
You know, in men, it's not really a major concern. In men, it's just that discharge that everyone doesn't like. Right. In women, much bigger, much more serious issue. There's usually the three biggest things that we see in women, especially if it goes untreated, is number one is infertility. Women come in, they've been trying to get pregnant for a long time, and they just can't. Right. And something simple as a chlamydia culture, we can diagnose it and treat it pretty effectively. The other thing we see is that it causes is something called pelvic inflammatory disease, which again, part of that is it's an inflammatory process. Right. You get the infections, you get the pain. It can also cause tubal pregnancies, ectopic pregnancies we call them, which means instead of the pregnancy being implanted in the uterus, it gets stuck in the fallopian tubes, the little tubes that connect your ovaries to your uterus.
Why are women 3 times more likely to get chlamydia than men?
They have no symptoms, number one. Yeah. Women just don't have symptoms. They don't. There's nothing to really complain about as a whole, unless they start having one of the complaints we talked about, which was they're not getting pregnant, or they go into their routine testing, especially when we do routine testing every year, especially with their pap smears. We catch it because that's just part of the routine cultures. Well,
here's something. Syphilis. It was almost extinct like 10 years ago, and now we're hearing that it's making a comeback. Why is syphilis coming back?
Syphilis is a little bit more interesting. Syphilis, I think we're recognizing it more with syphilis. I think syphilis is more recognizable. We know more. We recognize it. Syphilis, well, people are actually complaining more. If we can see it, you come in with a little ulcer that you can't describe. The thing is, it goes away. Okay. I think mainly it's coming down to being able to recognize it, and we can screen for it. The test is relatively pretty simple.
And that's a simple blood test. The next thing, how do we get our STDs under control, or STIs as they're now being called too, infections? What do people need to do? Screen, not have sex, have protective sex? What do you recommend? All the above.
Protective sex is definitely a good way to go.
Abstinence,
abstinence would be great.
That'd be great.
I don't know if everyone's going to follow that one. I think definitely the condom would be a great way to go. The other thing is know your partner. Make sure everyone gets tested. Keep in mind these are all reportable, especially if you had it once. It's really important to get your partner tested. If you're positive, get your partner tested. That's a huge thing. We're getting much better with surveillance as far as being able to track people, especially with the CDC. These are all reportable. So when people do get at the laboratory, the labs tend to start reporting these, and we need to. If we don't report them, then we're never going to catch them.
Dr. Abrishamy, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure to see you.
When you think health, think IRU.